Hi there, Mike MacArthur from the Oshkosh Public Library here with more Librarian Learns. This is a series where I take a look at little bits of Oshkosh history that I found interesting or people had asked me about since I've been working at the library. Today we're talking about a time when Hollywood came to Oshkosh, the filming of Public Enemies in Oshkosh. So Public Enemies was an adaptation of Brian Burroughs' 2004 nonfiction book, Public Enemies, America's Greatest Crime Wave and the Birth of the FBI, 1933 to 34. The film was going to be directed by Michael Mann, who is a multiple Academy Award nominee. He actually went to school at the University of Madison and studied English there. You might know some of his work from crime dramas like Heat or Thief. He did Last of the Mohicans, Ollie, Collateral, all such big shows. And he produced Miami Vice in the 80s. The movie started coming together in 2007, and you got casting news. Christian Bale was going to be in it. Marie Cotillard, I can't remember her name, French actress. But the big star was going to be Johnny Depp, was cast as John Dillinger. So why shooting in Wisconsin? Why Oshkosh? Well, Michael Mann is a big fan of filming on location. He doesn't like sets. He films where the events took place. So if you're looking for kind of 1920s, 30s architecture, Wisconsin is a good place to look. But there was another reason they filmed in Wisconsin that's even more important, and that was tax breaks. Under a law that went into effect January 1st, 2008, a film production could qualify for a tax credit of up to 25% of wages paid to employees to produce film, TV, electronic games, etc. in Wisconsin. Hollywood goes where they're going to get the savings. So word leaked out in December of 2007 that they were scouting locations in Wisconsin for the next big Michael Mann, Johnny Depp movie. Production manager kind of one day in January wandered into the Grand and started asking questions and looked at some other places around town. People started getting real suspicious when they started putting out casting calls for extras and casting calls for vintage cars in the area. It wasn't until March 10th that things were officially announced. Shortly after it was announced, director Michael Mann and his production crew showed up in Oshkosh to kind of scout the location and figure out how they were going to shoot the scenes in Oshkosh. And to give you a sense of scale, like 50 people showed up to scout the location. Quite surprising to businesses and people here at the time. Downtown Oshkosh was going to be used for two main scenes, both of them kind of bank robbery scenes. Main Street was going to be transformed into Sioux Falls, South Dakota for the filming of a bank robbery and gunfight that took place in March 6 of 1934. The First National Bank on the corner of North Main stood in for the Security National Bank and Trust, which Dillinger and Babyface Nelson robbed in 1934. And the front of the Masonic Temple on Washington Avenue became the exterior of the American Bank and Trust Company of Racine, Wisconsin, which the Dillinger gang robbed in November 20th, 1933. There were a couple of additional scenes, one being shot out at Whitman Field and the other being shot in the town of Clayton, kind of off the Wheelwash Trail. So on Tuesday, March 25th, 2008, the Common Council passed a resolution saying that the city would assist in the filming of the Public Enemies movie here. Again, when a production this size comes to town, streets need to be closed, police and security need to be arranged. So right after that, crews showed up pretty much the next day and started transforming 2008 Oshkosh into 1930s Oshkosh. Crews came in immediately and started pulling down modern signage, and the buildings all received new facades, paints, and kind of period signage. So big things had to be changed, like the signs, but little things had to be changed too to make things period accurate, such as painting the fire hydrants from yellow to black. Storefronts the facades were not just changed, but they were also filled with period items for sale. The sundial was removed and the square was covered by a large fence that boasted period poster advertisements. And if you look at the ground, you can see pictures where they laid down this rubber cobblestone to cover portions of the street. So even before any of the film crews arrived, people came down to check out the transformation. Prior to April 10th, before the film crew showed up, you could walk up and drive down Main Street and see the kind of production. Johnny Depp made his first appearance here in Oshkosh on April 10th, shooting the scene out at Whitman Airport. Somewhat anticlimactic in that you couldn't really see what was going on. But filming started shooting in downtown Oshkosh on Monday, April 14th. And I do mean shooting. Again, they were filming bank robberies. So they had them come out and they're firing off Tommy guns and pistols and stuff like that in the middle of the afternoon. And even though I think everyone was warned that this would be happening, I still believe the police department got some panicked calls that gunfire was raining down from the city. So again, these were big productions. People were, hundreds and then thousands of people lined up to kind of try to get a glimpse of it in production. On several occasions after filming had been completed, Johnny Depp himself came out to the crowds, shook hands, greeted fans, which were sometimes, hundreds, if not thousands of people who had skipped work, skipped school, drove home, to visit from out of state, which is pretty awesome considering this was, again, like I said, the peak Johnny Depp movie star fandom. Right in the middle of the Pirates of the Caribbean, he was everywhere. The film wrapped on Friday the 18th, and pretty much on the next Saturday morning, crews came up to pull down all the sets and 1930s set dressings. And I was told basically by Monday you would have never known that a full-scale movie production had been in town. It was estimated that the film brought in about $4 million to the local area. Afterwards, the Public Museum got some of the props. And for the rest of the month, people were trading stories about what they saw and tales of basically Johnny Depp being a movie star. There was also a sense of excitement just around downtown and in the city that lingered for like a month or more afterwards. What jumped out to me were a couple of things. One, some people were really bummed that the sundial came back. They were like, we had a chance to get rid of it, and they brought it back. Two, people were really excited and interested in downtown in a way that they hadn't been kind of in years. Filming brought people from the community to downtown that hadn't been here in a long time. It reminded people of the kind of classic architecture and history of the area. There was a boost in civic pride that showed everyone kind of what downtown could be with just some little bit of modernization, some paint, and some restoration. Acting city manager John Fitzpatrick wanted this 1930s makeover to act as inspiration for the planned 2010 Main Street renovations. So directly after it wrapped, it was celebrated as a big boost to the local and state economy, showing that the tax incentive legislation really worked. However, this was 2008, and some of you might remember what else was going on in 2008, and that was a massive recession was really taking hold, and Wisconsin was about to start facing some deep budget deficits. And those tax credits started falling under heavier scrutiny. So by 2009, there were rumblings that certain legislatures were seeing this tax incentive as kind of a blank check for Hollywood, and that it wasn't really generating the kind of revenue and economic activity that it was intended to. So for example, when they broke down the numbers, it looked like the film brought in a total of about $5 million of economic activity. However, the state, through the tax incentive program, had to reimburse the production about $4.6 million. So was it really worth it? I don't know. The Wisconsin legislature clearly thought no and scrapped the incentive program in the next budget cycle, replacing it with a $500,000 grant program, which is nice, but not enough to lure a production the size of Public Enemies back to the state. So while there has been other filming in Wisconsin, there hasn't been anything on the scale of Public Enemies since. So here I'm at the corner of Main Street and Algoma, right where they filmed, this is where they started filming the scenes here in Oshkosh. The bank behind, the First National Bank behind me, standing in for a different bank in, I believe this is the Racine shootout. Anywho, this one they actually did film inside the old First National Bank. It was kind of reconverted and dressed up to what once again looked like a bank. And then they, came out and had their shootout, and Johnny Depp gets shot, and they, bullets rain out, and all very exciting. From a different angle here across the street, you can see obviously the sundial there, which was removed and covered up, by those big kind of fence boards and vintage posters. What I find interesting about this is, I wasn't here, but circa 2008, my impression is that Main Street didn't quite look as well put together, as nice as it does here in circa 2025. And so when they dressed it all up and took it back to the 1930s, but dressed up and improved generally, it was like, oh wow, it could look a lot better. And happily, again, as someone who got here several years after the filming, I think it does. All right, so here I am in front of the Masonic Temple. This is where they shot one of the bank robbery scenes. So you have them robbing a bank in the interior there, which was, again, not the Masonic Temple. I believe they used the Masonic Temple for costuming storage during the shoot. So all the interiors were shot somewhere else, but when they come out of the building, they come out right here. And you had, earlier in the scene, Brad Dourif is sitting here acting as a lookout, watching for the cops. And when they all come out, and then the shootout ensues, and they fire down the street, and then they hop on their car and drive down the block in a glorious escape, which I love, because you get the library gets like a big hero shot where I'm like, hey, there's the library they're escaping past. So while watching the scene, I noticed that something about like the geography of the buildings and whatnot doesn't look quite right. It looks a little different than when you're standing on it right here. Well, if you look at some of our kind of the behind the scenes footage or photos that we took during the shooting, you can see that they erected like a massive green screen, like right where I'm standing, that covered the front of this building. So my guess is they, used that and shot behind when they're looking at Brad Dourif looking on the street. They used it to kind of change the geography of the street a little bit. My guess is they wanted to move things a little closer together, bring the post office building that's over kind of across the street a little closer, and kind of eliminate this parking lot that's kind of directly across the street here. It just doesn't kind of look right. So that's what you got to believe. Hollywood, even where they shot, it isn't really where they shot, kind of thing. So hey, I learned something. If you like these videos, want to see more, again, like, subscribe, comment. Were you here during the filming? Did you meet Johnny Depp? What was he like? Let me know in the comments. And with that, I will see you later.